Cari amici sportivi, welcome. It's TVP back, the local soccer show, bringing you some content on local soccer, grassroots soccer. Guys, we love having guests on, and we love having return guests on. And tonight, it's a real pleasure to have this returning guest on because he had also a little part in my coaching pathway, which is pretty cool. Saw him live, work his magic, teach his magic. So it's really cool for me to have him on. But before we start, guys, we can't have the guests, we can't have the local soccer show without the beautiful people of Evangelista Sports, guys. It's Christmas time. Go get your socks, go get your shin pads, go get your cleats, go get your gear. Evangelista Sports, guys, online or live in store at their locations in beautiful Saint Laurent. Have a nice coffee. It is a bit cold, so have a nice coffee. Or in Laval, enjoy the Lavalians in 450 land. And guys, check them out for all your soccer gear, guys. So the local soccer show, guys, that's what it is. And I'm happy and very, very honored to have back on returning guest, Mr. David Cerasuolo. David, welcome to the local soccer show again. Second cap.
Hey, very right. Very, true. Hi, Steve. How's it going? Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Very good, very good, guys. And we're gonna be honest. Last week, I'm gonna apologize live on the air for everybody to have, and he can keep it with him for the rest of his life. That I made a scheduling error and had poor David, stay away from his family. So this David is not paying me for this, and this is not the recording that he can show his wife. He stayed at the office because we miscalculated the days. I thought it was Thursday, he thought it was Wednesday, and he had to stay late. So Mrs. Cerasuolo, your wife, your family, I apologize. David, I hope that's good enough, and we can
That's
carry on.
you're definitely gonna get an extra view from my wife, so that's fantastic.
Fantastic,
Awesome. Thanks,
fantastic.
Steve.
David, the last time we had you on, you were in local soccer, and now you've moved on to provincial soccer. Tell us a little bit about that journey for you, and your role now as a responsable au développement et la performance.
Yeah, so obviously still in the Quebec soccer landscape, right? Was in um, the club game for quite a few years, and honestly, people ask me this question a lot, and I enjoyed my time very much. I was in a great club. I enjoyed the people I was working with, and the opportunity came up to work. Soccer Quebec. Soccer Quebec's an institution of soccer in our province, and I just felt it was maybe a good time uh, to maybe look at something else, do something else, right? Get your feet wet doing something else, different work experience, and it really wasn't an easy decision. All life changes aren't easy. We always try to consider them from as many angles as possible, but in the end, again, I knew I was also going to a place that had good people, and that I felt that I could contribute, and I think that at the base is really important for me. Is always, can you contribute to the landscape? Can you contribute to the system? Can you do something that's positive and just play your part? So I took the leap of faith, and now it's a little bit over a year, and again, enjoying it, and yeah, on we go,
Amazing.
onwards and upwards.
Amazing. And like I said at the beginning of the show, guys, I had the pleasure of going taking my coaching path, colliding with David and his change of career at Soccer Quebec, and I was able to attend online sessions and in-person sessions with David at Soccer Quebec for my C license. And I know it's something that I told you in person, but I think it's for everybody to hear. You are a great educator. You are a great teacher, and I tip my hat because it's a challenging thing. And to do it with kids is one thing. To do it with adults who some may or may not think that they know everything, and try to break that mold with them. I tip my hat. It was a fantastic experience, and we have it live on camera again. That's another thing you can show off in the near future. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, too kind, and honestly, it's I can almost speak on behalf of all my colleagues, because we always have this discussion. You know how it is. They're not easy weekends. They're long weekends. They're grueling. A lot of information, a lot of work, but it's pleasant. Like it's really fun. It's really fun for the instructors too. It's a lot of hard work. Like it's a lot of hard work for the candidates, but it's rewarding work too. And again, you really get that feeling that you're connecting with people that not only have a passion, that are there for the right reasons, that want to better themselves, but these are people that are investing time and then going back into their communities, right, and trying to make things better. So it's honestly, it's one of the things I enjoy the most. It's a really cool process, and you get to meet some really interesting people along the way too. So yeah, no, definitely, we have a few fun stories from that course for sure.
Yeah, that was a really good experience, and I know I tried my best to be as serious as possible, which is it's very hard for me, and I think everybody there noticed. It's something that I love to do, and I enjoy it. And taking that course really was an eye opener of how much work it takes, how much work you still have. I still personally have to do, and how much more I need to learn, because that's, I think, something that is a bit of a misconception with people taking these courses. They think that you're going to go there and someone's going to inject this information into you, and you're going to come out of there as Pep Guardiola or Klopp. It's not the case. It's continuous work for forever, almost forever. And I learned something after like day one. Like I told myself I know nothing, and I think that changed my whole perspective on the course, because I just was a sponge to everything, right? So uh, besides that, David, what other responsibilities do you have now at Soccer Quebec?
Yeah, so actually, I just want to make a little comment just on the tail end of what you just said, and then I'll get into your question on my current responsibilities. But yeah, coaching, it's a journey, and it's a journey for everybody. You never really get there. You never really at destination, right? And we spoke about that in the course, and it's kind of um, it's so complex, right? Because if it's not a pure science, and it's not an art, it's that mix, it's that balance, right? It's a craft, and that's the way you need to approach it. And again, yeah, just getting back to a bit those exchanges we had in person with the candidates, absolutely. But jumping on, okay, your question right now. So yes, so it's been, like I said, it's been a little bit over a year, and so responsable au développement et la performance. In English, it would be head of performance development and performance. So again, the way we work in the department is that we, first of all, we all interact, and we all kind of help in each other's dossiers, right? So it's not really, you're never in a silo, right? You're working alongside your colleagues, but again, then there's people that are ultimately responsible for certain dossiers. So mine happen to be, the big ones would be obviously the PIP, right? Le Programme d'Identification Provinciale, right? So the Provincial Identification Program, and that also entails our scouting network, right? Or our scouting processes, our player identification processes, because again, through that we build our provincial teams, right? Or sometimes when the teams are finally formalized, right, and the roster's out and we're going to competition, you'll hear the term Équipe du Québec. So sometimes that's used interchangeably, right? But we usually go by Équipe du Québec once we're actually in competition, competing, right? But the process along the way, right, is PIP. Again, scouting, like I said, is a big part of it, and now, like we spoke a little bit about off air, the PHP, le Programme d'Haute Performance. So this is a program that is new this year, right? And that's definitely one of my major dossiers, right? That's come into my field of responsibilities.
And now you said, so this new program came out. It was announced November 15th. They had a fantastic picture of you back in the aquarium where you thrive. For people who don't know, the aquarium is Soccer Quebec's little room where they give out their course for certain people. And I happen to be in the aquarium, and we named it the aquarium. So all joking aside, this program comes out, and why did the federation create this program, this PHP program?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? What's the objective of the program?
Yeah, great question. So I guess where I'd want to start would be kind of where it fits in the pathway. I think that's important to understand, right? So The PIP operates at the U15, U16, and U17 age levels. Okay, so we don't have anything past U17 that's considered senior soccer, right? Youth, we consider it to be up until 17. And prior to the U15 PIP age, there's U13 and U14 PIR, Programme d'identification régionale, right? So that's a step under that builds in to that program. Obviously, the club programming also builds into PIP, right? So there's at U15, we're taking the accesses through PIR, also through the clubs, and then as of the U15 onwards, right, the scouting for players gets done through the club system. So PIP was kind of that highest level, okay, and as long as I can remember, and probably for many years, I don't have the exact year, but there's been provincial teams for decades, right? And we know because when we speak to people, everybody's had their experiences along the years. So as an institution, right, as the governing body, Soccer Quebec has always had a responsibility to kind of take care for its top tier players, right? And those players definitely exist in the PIP. They're there, right? It's that cohort of players. And again, when I say it's not always the same players, because we understand there's turnover, because it's a selection. It's based on performances. It's, you can be there at 15, then I'll be there at 17, and we get the dynamic. It's really a selection dynamic. But as you may have known, and maybe some of the listeners will have known, through the years, we've had Le PRF, we've had the Rex, we've had the National Training Center. So this was always a step or a program, a high performance program that sat above the provincial team, sat above the Équipe du Québec, sat above PIP. And this was, again, an even more elite group, right? Players that oftentimes, vast majority of times, were in the PIP, but again, even a more select group. And again, it was just a way to establish a program to get those players additional contacts. Okay, and it's taken many forms over the years. When I was working at the National Training Center, as early as 2012, it was in a sport études setup, so the players would still play in club. They were still playing club soccer on the weekend, but they were training 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, at the National Training Center. So players from Quebec City, like St. Louis, Outaouais, across the province, right, depending where they come from. And like I said, we've always had this type of a program that's existed in our overall programming, and for many reasons it didn't. And again, there was that catalyst of COVID, right? That kind of, like everything else,
derailed.
So this type of program kind of went away, right? And when I came in last year, again, it was one of the first discussions I had with Valerio Gazzola, right, Director of Development at Soccer Quebec, and he kind of laid it out for me very black and white. He said, like, we have an obligation to have this type of a program, and it's necessary, and it's a good thing for the system. And now it's just about thinking, how do we organize it? How do we put it in place so that it fits in our new landscape? Because we can all agree that the landscape in 2024 is vastly different than the landscape in 2019, and very different from the landscape in 2012, right? Yeah. Or 2000, right? So again, all these years had an iteration, a type of center that was operating, but always in a different way, because the parameters are different. So again, that's kind of where that was the reason, right? Okay. Long-winded answer, but I really wanted to give you the context.
No, but
right?
It's very important. And again, just for some people, like, and this is something that confuses me too. So like, we had this, this we call it a national center. So I'm assuming that the national center was attached to Canada Soccer,
right? So
in some way.
You obviously, there's the connection through the staffs, in the sense where we're in communication. And obviously, when you put something like this in play, it's not something that just lives in the idea in the mind of one employee or two employees. It's obviously something that we consult all the other actors, all the other technical directors, regional technical directors, club technical directors. We had to make them understand. I can give you a little bit of insight how we did that, but all to say that the government needs to be made aware as well, right?
Yeah.
Because there's government funds that are involved, right? So yeah, you do kind of get a seal of approval, an attestation from Canada Soccer saying, yeah, we recognize that Soccer Quebec is putting in place this type of a program with these types of parameters for this type of objective, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely.
So again, now we know, and again, it's just my thing. There, it could be tricky sometimes, and not insult. When you're dealing with governments at the provincial level and at the federal level. So, like, what kind of planning? If you could take us through the planning that you had to
Yeah.
go through. The planning, the research, and again, it's going to be a very technical question, but did you emulate it? Did you try to emulate a specific program, or this was just, I want to take
Yeah.
what I think Quebec needs?
So obviously, it in terms of when you're having those dialogues with the Minister of Education, you're not starting from scratch because something similar has existed in the past. So they have an idea of kind of what you're driving at. Okay. So then it was more, I think, Steve, the important part this time around, and if I, go back a year and say where we were, maybe now, maybe more like a, year and a half, it's kind of like, okay, the context is totally different right now. The landscape is totally different. The clubs are organized in a much different way. I mean, they've progressed, they've made tremendous strides. The PRC has come into play, club licensing, right? So, okay, how do we go about this so that everything is coherent, so that it makes sense, so that you don't have kids, training left, right, and center without any rhyme or reason? How do you get people on board? And honestly, people were very open. So we presented this idea, right? An initial, let's call it a V1 of this idea to, like I said, our colleagues, regional technical directors, club technical directors at last year's annual conference, right? L'après-match 2023, that was in Drummondville. And it was great because we got to sit down in a room, really get to, here's a little short presentation, 20, 30 minutes. This is what we're thinking, taking questions, brainstorming, a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths, weaknesses of this program? What do we need to be aware of? What pitfalls do we want to avoid? So it's great because you're again. So now you're immersing the idea in the community. So you're getting a feedback. It's not kind of like you're in the ivory tower saying, okay, we're just going to do this.
Yeah.
So we felt that support saying, okay, this iteration can fit in this way. So what we decided, again, going through those steps and then kind of coming back and reconciling all that, saying, okay, with where things are right now and coming from the fact that nothing was in place at this level for a few years, we said, let's target the off-season months. So the off-season months, I mean, go with the weather, November to, let's call it end of March,
Yeah.
right? Because more and more we're starting the seasons mid-April, third week of April. So I said, let's stay in that period of time. Yeah, it's indoor. Yes, there's going to be the cost associated to indoor infrastructure, but we also know that because of those costs associated to indoor infrastructure, sometimes clubs find it more difficult to make those investments in the winter. Or sometimes, even if they're willing to make the investments for teams to train, there's just a lack of availability,
Yeah.
right? The fields are not available, right? We're operating the program on an 11-a-side pitch, right? So that we said, let's start there. And we said, let's start 20 weeks, 10 field sessions, 10 online sessions. Because we said it's much better to start, quote unquote, slowly and progress, right? Seeing that, okay, we didn't overlook anything, we didn't not consider, we didn't get caught off guard by something, and then maybe progress it along the way again, as opposed to just coming in and saying, for instance, yeah, we're going back to 5 days a week, and it doesn't maybe make sense with the way things are operating right now, the way the clubs are operating, the regions are operating. So yeah, that's the way we did it, and I think it's been quite smooth because, again, 10 extra sessions, it's good. I mean, no one's going to pretend that in 10 sessions you can revolutionize the world or revolutionize a player, but it's an additional 10 sessions in the moment of the year where that level player would require extra contacts, and it perhaps could be difficult for their regular environment to offer them those extra sessions because of oftentimes indoor infrastructure and the costs and availability associated to it. And we said, and we'll do so. It's 1 week boys, 1 week girls. And on the off week, we said, let's do something interesting. I said, let's bring in partners. We have access to, top level experts, contact experts through l'INS, l'Institut National du Sport de Québec, whether it be content experts in physical prep or recovery or nutrition or mental prep. So all of this, and we'll bring them in to do seminars because again, this is also something that, in all honesty, the environments in Quebec, again, whether they be regions or clubs, are getting better and better at providing these types of resources. But we felt if we're saying that a player's at this level, then they need to have access to these kinds of resources, and not only the resources, but they need to have a contact expert explain to them, okay, this is the resource and these are the strategies that you can use and make them actionable so that, you as an athlete, now you're bringing this into your day to day because, we didn't want something that was, okay, this is a beautiful presentation, right? Give our athletes strategies. How do they make this actionable? How does it help them improve and progress along the way? And again, and that's how we came about it. So again, through a consultation at the beginning and treading, again, I don't want to say slowly. I think we're treading at the right pace. And it's, and yeah, so far we're 7 weeks in. Tonight was our 7th session and things are going well. Really happy with where the program's at right now.
So you mentioned, of course, winter is always a challenge, and for indoor infrastructure is costly and scarce, to say the least. My question would be, and again, I don't know if you said it and maybe I missed it. So these kids, boys and girls, they're from what age to what age?
U15. So in this year, our U15s consider them to be 2010s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And up until U17s would be 2008.
Okay.
So we targeted around 30 boys and 30 girls. And I hate being arbitrary, but the ballpark number of 30 was because we were saying we're on an 11-a-side field. And the objective, unfortunately, there's always going to be an absence or maybe an injury. We want to be able to play 11v11, but you also don't want too many players sitting out because there's players that are making, tremendous sacrifice to be there on a Thursday in the afternoon at 3:30, right?
Yeah.
Even whether they're coming from the greater Montreal area, but they could be coming from the South Shore to Laval. Yeah. And we have players coming as far as Quebec City, right? Mm-hmm. So again, it's 1 week on, 2 in person. Yeah. So again, one of our is to make sure that when they do come, that the effective time of training, it's a 90-minute session, but we want to make sure that we're really maximizing the amount of time that they get on the ball and they're active and they're stimulated, right? They're not coming to just, hear our voices, right?
Absolutely.
So 30 players. And again, then, I mean, if you want, I can get into a little bit about how we went about establishing the 30.
Yeah, before that though, because it's, when I say it here, I'm in the process of, my son got accepted to Sport Etudes, and, I see him going through that pathway, and he plays soccer at a local club, and that's 4 times a week. Now we're going to introduce Sport Etudes in the next year for him. I'm trying to understand. It's a question that I've asked others before. How do we manage these kids' loads? What's too much? Like now, I'm pretty sure that not all the kids, but maybe some of them, still play local club soccer. They have to, basically, because you need to identify them at a very high level. They're probably not all, but I'm assuming some are in Sport Etudes, and now you're introducing the PHP. How do you guys manage that?
You're spot on with these questions, Steve. Well done. So I'll go back last year to l'après-match. And another one of my colleagues, so as I'm presenting the PHP, before I actually present to the audience of colleagues we had, what the PHP would be, he was presenting periodization, right? Meaning, how many times are these kids going to train? What is acceptable? What is not? What are the moments of the year where the volume could be higher, lower? what are the intensities like? What makes sense, right? Because we had situations, and again, we were aware of it. And when I say we, I mean everybody that's working in the environment is saying, well, you used to have sometimes these cases where a kid would finish Sport and train at this time. I'd finish at, I don't know, 3:30, and then run off to their practice at 6:30. And yeah, okay, so that's once a week, but it's not right. It's not optimal. Like, and we know that, right? And that was something where everybody's saying, everybody was saying we need to be better. It was always just about the how. So again, and it's quite extensive, but what I'll give you is that right now there are really open lines of communication between all the leads of these programs, okay? And there are parameters that have been put in place, right? So periodization, schedules, calendars that, example, you need to follow if you're in a solitude, you're in a club. So depending on the type of player you have on your hands, and what I mean by that is you can have a player that's in solitude and club. You can have a player now, you just mentioned it, right? Well, he's in a club, they're in a solitude, but David, now you have PHP on a Thursday. How does that work? Well, on the Thursday, the priority is the PHP session. They won't do their solitude session. Everybody is aware. We're all operating on the same guidelines, right?
Amazing.
Won't do their club session. So they know that the kids can come and dedicate themselves, like totally to that 90 minutes, because for training to really be impactful, you need to be there really like on all fronts, right? It's not just physical, mentally, emotionally, like, and if you do it well, it's draining in a good way, right? Because you go all out, you try to push yourself to your maximum ability, and if you've done it right, it's very difficult to reproduce that level of performance 3 hours later on maybe a
Two
quick little
times in
bite
one
to
day.
eat. Exactly right. So I think honestly, if I look at what's being done across the province, across the programs, tremendous strides compared to realities that we were facing not too long ago. And again, it's never about people having bad intentions. It's just about, sometimes there's too much stuck in your own thing, and not enough communication. And I would say that was the source of it. And I think we've done a lot of work collectively as a system to make that a lot better. So the kids are not facing those choices or those funny days anymore, right? So we've done a lot of work there.
Yeah, and you know what? The communication, that's something that we could always be better, right? Where there's no, again, like you said, there's no ceiling to, or you're never going to get to that optimal coaching standard, because you always want to learn. I feel the same way with communication. Like, I think, sometimes, yes, when you're communicating a message, over communication is not good. But sometimes when you need to organize stuff, like the more everybody's on the same page, I think the kids in the end, because it is for them. Sometimes we forget that, but it is for them, and it's optimal for them.
Yeah. So, and I'll
You
give you just, oh, sorry. Can
No,
I
no,
just
no.
add something,
Go ahead.
Steve?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, another thing is, say, well, concretely how? Well, there's a partnership we have with XPS, right? And it's not just the federation. Obviously, there's clubs and there's regions that have that as well. So, when a player is linked on this system, right, and they're in a solitude or they're in a club, you can kind of see what they've done during the week. Like that information now can be shared digitally across the platform. So I know that, for instance, the player that I had today at 4:30, they're coming in, and in the last week since I last saw them, well, I last saw them 2 weeks ago. So in, let's say, 2 weeks since I last saw them, they've had X amount of sessions. They feel that they've put this amount of effort, right? RPE, so it's perceived rate. Um, and we also ask them for their wellness on a daily basis. So it could be if you look at the time of the year, the kids might be in exams, they might be a little bit more stressed. Maybe they're staying up a little bit later because they're
Yeah,
studying for exams, and I don't feel as rested. So again, we ask them. There's these wellness questionnaires. It lasts about 30 seconds. They answer 3-4 things, and it gives us an idea of kind of, well, what conditions am I getting the kid in, right? So, that helps us kind of gauge too. And again, it's not, I'm not an expert. It's not perfect science, but already when you're aware to it, already you can navigate differently as opposed to not having that information, then being forced to make certain assumptions. So again, there's so many things that have been done the last little while across process system, and I think it's just made things definitively and noticeably better.
Yeah. And how do you deal with clubs or that are not on XPS? Because there is a financial cost to that, and not all
Yeah,
clubs can afford the XPS.
no, absolutely. And look, for instance, the players we have in our program, right, the PHP, because that's what we're talking about tonight,
Hmm.
right? So they would be they're onboarded through our platform. So
Okay.
regardless of the fact of whether they have access through another environment that they're in or not, they have access through ours, right? So,
Okay.
I'm still getting those daily updates, right? But it's coming from the player,
Okay.
right? Which is still, again, there's it too much. It's not too much information, right?
Yeah.
You learn how to sift through it,
Hmm.
right, to make it make sense.
Unbelievable. That's amazing. No one ever asked us if we were tired. That's for sure. Uh, you said, and this is something that I think we need to touch on, because your program, Soccer Quebec, I would assume there's no geographical limit on in the province of Quebec. So how did you scout these players? How did you find them? Once that pool's identified, like who decides? Are the clubs involved? Are they not involved? Like that process is something that I think people would love to hear about.
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna try to give you as complete an answer as possible,
Yeah.
and I think it starts with you go into it knowing that scouting, for all the efforts you're gonna put, and for all the efforts that the people that are gonna help you, and I'll tell you all the people that are involved, it's never perfect. It's an imperfect process, right? So, that always guides you a bit, because everybody always goes above and beyond, because you kind of start knowing this can't be perfect, right? But I want it to be. That's the intention. Like, the desire would be like, we didn't make a mistake, So you kind of start from that mindset. Um, so then concretely, how do we do it? So let's take the year where we built for. So our 2024-2025 pool of players for the PHP, U15 to U17, 2010s to 2008s. So for the 2010s, who are currently U15, they were U14 in the summer, right? And in the summer, U14, one of the main, or the main identification activity we have is the PIR. And that's kind of how the PIR links into the PIP, right? So now when you talk about
Mhm.
geographic representation, we're going to one competition that's going to allow us to see multiple players in multiple games, all in the same venue, right? Competing against each other. And so they're coming, so every region now is responsible for building their team. And it's a process. The program, the PIR, is built over 2 years, U13 and U14. So they're working in their region. They're going through their identification process. They're working with the players. They're building their team. They're preparing them for competition to put them in the best conditions possible, so that, Soccer Quebec staff can come and identify players at a Jeux du Québec or a TSR, right? Because it's 1 year on two.
Yeah.
And so that's the main activity for U14. We also take a look, right? We also look at club at U14, right? So you have the LDP, right? That again, and again, it's difficult because there's many clubs, many teams that compete in LDP, and that's obviously one of the benefits of having the PIR, which it kind of unites, the better players from every
Yeah.
region, the most competent players at that moment in time that the competition is there, right? And again, this is an ever-changing process, because we spoke about it in the course, right? I come back to that C diploma, right, where
Yeah.
players are developing on different curves, but the competition is at U14. So every region is responsible for building their team and bringing a team that they feel are players that are of the level and deserve being put in that situation, right? So then we do that, and then at U15 and at U16. So if we go back in summer 2024, it would have been the 2009s that were U15 and the 2008s that were U16, right? Then graduate to U16,
Hmm.
U17 as of the winter. We went and scout during the club championship,
Okay.
right? So we're going through to league games, right? Essentially, we're going to league games, right? Sprinkled across the months of June, July, August, a little bit of September. Okay. And the reason for that is that's where it fits well, where, when we come into the spring, we have our PIP camps. So a lot of the staff is invested in, final preparations for the Quebec Ontario series that finishes mid-May. Mid-May finishes, sometimes they take a week off, sometimes they don't, and we jump right into scouting, right? So that's kind of that period. So we're identifying players there. So then what happens is all that identification work, that scouting work that is done through the summer months kind of culminates with the invitations that are done for the fall PIP, right? So the fall PIP camps. So then we bring in players, U14, U15, or rather U15, U16 in the fall, right? Because in our mind, that's when they jump the year. And again, that gives us a few weeks. That gives us actually 2 weeks, right? Because we need to prepare our lists to communicate to families and to schools and to the RSs, or to have that pertinent communication with all the necessary people. We can't wait till 3 days before the program starts, right? So we work it out in a way where we got ourselves the possibility to bring all the players we scouted during the summer, during 2 camps. So again, that offered another platform for us to kind of validate,
Did
where
you
we
make the
stood with our
right choice or
decisions.
not? Yeah.
Yeah, because we have them now all in the same place again. Because again, that's a key part of it too. You can go scout this game and that game, but at a certain point, you do need that direct comparison, right? So that's what I would say is all the scouting work, that is the identification work that is done through watching games. But the other part, and again, that's where we really connect with the community and the regions and the clubs, so the regional technical directors and their staff, and the club technical directors and their staff, is we have a process where, like I said, we start from the perspective that this is going to be an imperfect process. So we ask for recommendations. Is there anybody you think we may have missed? And the recommendation process has become a little bit more robust. You need to, it's not just saying a name, right? They'll fill out their, the little report. We get a little bit of video to kind of, because if we have missed this player, it's possible, right? Then we kind of need to see, well, what is it that we missed, right? So we get, okay, a video, good. And I can compare it to, okay, this player, we get a sense. So again, it kind of helps us have more rich discussions, because it's not anymore just saying you should bring in this name, because then you'll have a high degree of insecurity when you need to do that, because you're like, I haven't seen this kid, right? He could be great,
and
but
it's not
I
a
could
fair.
be.
It's not a fair
It's not
process
fair.
to you either.
Exactly.
It's not a fair process to you either, because I could say, here, take my son, but have you ever seen my son? Is my son even at the level? So with the help of video, and you said they are submitting not like an actual form and submitting video. So it's kind of like they're applying for college in NCAA.
So it's but what that does, and I think the most important part of that, Steve, what it does is that once these recommendations come in, right, what it does is it kind of opens another line of communication, because now you get on the phone, you follow up with a TD. You say, what, I got this video, these are my thoughts, this is where I'm at, what do you think? I speak internally with my staff, like, take a look at this video. You try not to sway them in one direction or another. You say, listen, I need you to take a look at this video, this is the player, get back to me, right? And again, you kind of, you hammer away at it, right? And then at the end, it comes down to, you need to make a list, you need to make final decisions, and some of them are difficult, they're tough. And I think what makes it more tough is, again, we know the importance that it represents a lot of times for the player, the family too, right? So again, you come by and like, man, I want to be perfect. But that might not be the case. But I feel comfortable. We really go through a robust process. There's a due diligence, and again, you make the best decisions possible. You live with them, and whenever you can rectify a decision, you do it, right? Because you want to grab hold of that opportunity, right? Because for me, when you can rectify a decision, it means that you're giving an opportunity to a player that you would have otherwise missed. And sometimes it happens that, the timings, the windows don't align, and it's kind of like we're too far in a process, it'll fall into next cycle.
Mhm.
And again, that seems sometimes like, unfair, but there's a lot that goes into it, because at a certain point, especially with the PIP, you also want to give your coaches time to work with the players. The time is already very limited. So again, you kind of have it mapped out where this is kind of the windows we'll give ourselves to see new players, but after that we'll kind of close and try to work. And again, we know that the cycle starts again next year. So this year we're going through a process with, we're going to have our PIP, the Quebec Ontario series. The PHP will finish in March, end of March, and then, like I said, in the summer, it starts all over again. There's no guarantees. It's not that you were here in 24, 25, that you'll be there in 25, 26. On the contrary, you have to earn your place just like everybody else. And we'll go through the same process and the same scouting endeavor, right, to come to this point next year. And again, hope to have really the players that are deserving to be, participating in our programs. And that's kind of the logic year in, year out.
Nice. So interesting, and again, it must be a very long process. One last question on this before I go to just to something else that popped in my head there. In terms of, obviously they're graded on, you know physical talent, right? They need to be talented at the game of soccer. How much importance do you and the staff put on the psyche? There's players that are, they're touched, they're really fantastic talents, but they can't perform with a team. They have, on the psyche part, as much as you work with them, it just doesn't work. Are chances taken on those kids, or is that a
So,
big factor?
so obviously, everything that, if we look at, four corners of a player, and we're talking now about, mental or maybe social emotional stuff, where obviously if I'm coming and see you twice during a summer and I'm seeing you play live, yeah, I might catch on to it, I might not. And that obviously that's the added value, and that's the importance of the relationships we have with the technical leaders in the community, is that, if this kid is playing in a club, he's part of a sport. There's somebody there with expertise, with competence, that I can get on the phone with, speak to, and say, I saw this during the game. Like, what are your thoughts? And they can share, they can elaborate, they can give me a sense. Oh, that's really out of character, or yeah, that's, it's been struggling, or she's been struggling with that. And again, you get a more total picture. And then at the end, we need to make a decision, right? So again, you might feel like it's a, quote unquote, a risk worth taking, or maybe there's somebody else that's more deserving for a set of reasons that, you've gone through, we've established. But that's definitely one of the huge upsides and advantages of being able to link back to the community and the technical leaders, getting that insight.
So fascinating. There's one question, and again, it's going to be a hot, but not a hot topic. It's something you can straight out tell me I'm not going to answer. But we do understand that there's a professional team in
Yeah,
Quebec, in
yeah.
Montreal, and that's CF Montreal, and they
There's
do
two
have
now.
yeah, we have two, exactly, for women and for men. So this program, how close do you work with either CF Montreal, or now the Roses?
Yeah.
Because this is a stepping stone for them, because after 17, their natural progression, again, for the women is the Roses. For CF Montreal, it's a little bit different, because they already have an academy. Are those players incorporated in your PHP at a certain point? Do you really have the best
Yeah.
players in that category? Like, how does that
So
work? And please, if this puts you
no,
in
it's a
in
great
the
question.
okay.
Let me have at it. So look, if we look at, let's start with CF Montreal, right? And CF Montreal right now is operating, right. So they have a youth academy, and
Mhm.
they actually have programs for girls and boys, right? So different age groups, but programs for girls and boys in those youth cohorts, right? In those
Absolutely.
15 to 17, right? I 18 now, boys. Um, so part of the reason to initially establish the PHP And part of the reason that this type of program also existed in the past in one way, shape, or another, one was that, again, we've spoken about developmental curves and players, and you're making a selection. You've identified players at 15, and whether it be CF Montreal, Soccer Quebec, the Roses, a European club, a South America, a club anywhere in the world, right? You're taking a picture, you're making a decision in a particular moment in time, right? I need to make my decision by October 31st. Picture, snap. Who do I feel are the best players vis-a-vis the parameters and the profiles we've established? Then you work with those players. Some of them are exactly what you thought they'd be. Some of them overperform your expectations. Some of them underperform your expectations, right? And that's where maybe, you need to change. And that's why we felt this program was critical, was because we never know. We never know which player we have. Like it's not so black and white. So as to say that example, like U15, CF Montreal has the best 20 players every year, no doubt.
Exactly.
It could be that, there's one that they missed, or not that they missed, they're aware of them, but vis-a-vis the profile of player they're looking for, they didn't check enough boxes, right? So there's preferences, right? And that's something that I think we live a little bit more difficult in, a little bit with a little bit more difficulty here, because there's less professional environments. Whereas if you take another country, right, whether it be Italy, England, or Germany, there's tons, right? So if Milan doesn't like me, I go to Inter. If Inter doesn't like me, I go to Atalanta, and we're still in Lombardia, like we haven't come out of that, right? So it's a totally different dynamic. So that's really important for us, is to say we wanted. There are tons of good players, right? So we wanted to make sure that we had a platform for the players in our youth structure that were not, right, already maybe living a high level environment, notably, CF Montreal, maybe in the future with the Roses, right? So we felt that as Soccer Quebec, as that governing body, as that institution, that's something that we need to have in place, right? So that, we're missing as few players as possible, right? So that's definitely part of the logic. Now, in terms of of working together, again, I'm very lucky to to have very good relationships with the leaders of those programs. So I speak with them regularly, and case in point would be, since we they're almost always present at our PIP activities, unless they have one that's in conflict, right? But 90% plus of the time they're there. Oftentimes we're sitting side by side watching the game, right? Analyze the players, discussing, right? And I think that's great. And again, obviously, I extended the invitation for them to attend all the PHP sessions. They obviously were aware, and they obviously they send staff every week. So that's interesting too, right? Because they're staying connected to this other pool of players. And again, for them, it's very valuable, because we've identified them, we've made a decision, we've brought in a group that obviously is a high performance group, and they're all in one place, right? And we're all under the same building. And for them, it's really easy to just, come to the pitch, take an hour and a half in, take in the session. And again, they get to see the players themselves. We get to have discussions when they feel they need more info, more context. But no, it's a very good and open relationship. So again, we're not working in silos, right? Mm-hmm. Again, then sometimes people will say, well, how come then, a player can be there but not here, or vice versa? Is because, like anything else, the profile isn't identical. There's certain times little preferences, little differences, little nuances that are appreciated differently. And sometimes that can be all the difference. It doesn't make you categorically good or bad. It's just a difference of opinion, right? So, but I think this is something that has always existed and will always exist. Just because, like I said, I think it's a little bit more difficult in our context when there's less professional club environment. So people kind of feel like, it seems more antagonistic.
Yeah. No, it's just again, it's great that we're working together, especially CF Montreal. But what about the progression to, this is at the provincial level? These kids would, I assume, aspire to one day either play for CF Montreal or the Roses. But especially in women's soccer, probably more so than men's soccer, their next step for a women is, either the Roses, but also you look to the national team. What's the connection with Canada Soccer and this program? Are they
Like I,
also involved?
yeah, so like I mentioned at the beginning, they're obviously well aware because we had to involve them in our, in a sense, to make them aware of what we were doing. Because as we were applying for this process, through levels of government, etc., but yeah, they're not involved day to day in the operation. They don't sit with us in the staff meeting, right? But what we do with the youth national team coaches would be, there's a lot more of a sharing of resources. So, we'll get together, let's say once a quarter, right? Officially, formally on meetings, and there's a sharing of content, and these are trends, these are things that have happened, these are learnings we've had from, they'll come back from U17 competition and say, well, look, we played against this type of an opponent, this is the type of difficulty we've had. And we found that players generally in our environments, let's say in our country, struggle to do this. Well, that's great. You take it on. You're like, okay, that's good. Insight, good. How can we work that? What do you think? And so there is a connection, right? There's a sharing of information. They're not involved day to day. And then again, maybe less frequently, but again, we've also obviously extended invitations for them to attend sessions and programs. So if I look at, notably the two big high performance programs, they come to the Quebec Ontario series. They're always present, female staff and male staff to scout, right? Because obviously, again, you're reuniting, which is what is a high level, high performance group on both sides, right? You have Ontario and Quebec that provide statistically a good proportion of players, oftentimes to youth national team programs, and with the PHP, it's the same thing, right? So we're already looking at dates in Q1 of 2025. So January, February, March, for them to come in and maybe take a session in, maybe run a session, right? So we're looking at a few different avenues for them to kind of immerse themselves in that environment and kind of for the players to feel that connection, right? Because again, the players feel it really when they see somebody with the badge, right? Like when we do a Rex integration camp.
Yeah.
So even though we tell them and they know that, there is that sharing of info, right? There is that connection that we have as technical leads, as leaders, it becomes so much more concrete for the player when, they see that person, understandably so, right? So again, we try to create those opportunities as often as possible.
Amazing, David. And I thank you again for coming on and sharing this. That I hope people have either read the article or will see this podcast and learn from it. We're an hour in, and I know we can go for an hour more, but in the context of time and to get you home to your family, what's next for David? Now you want to do this. You're at this PHP. Is there another project on the horizon that you're thinking of, that you can or cannot talk about? I totally understand. But what's next for David?
Yeah, so I would say that again, first of all, it's not what's next just for me, right? It's not, I don't decide unilaterally. And again, I'm supported by a lot of colleagues and obviously, but there are a few projects in the works. Okay. But again, and I won't share them at this time, but again, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is when we're talking about projects or advancements is, well, how does it fit? Right? How do you add value to what is already being done? How is it coherent for the athlete that's living through these programs and not just let's create a new program, right? So there's that delicate balance, right? But what I can say and what I'm really optimistic about is that there's a lot of desire. Like there's maybe it might not always appear that way, but I can tell you that the community is very much on the same page. For we understand that players, they need these types of opportunities. So no one is against giving the players these types of opportunities. It's about, or these types of programs. It's about logistically how do we make it make sense within the bigger picture of everything else that is done in our landscape.
Yeah, and this is again the ultimate goal, right? Having the players play at the highest level with their peers is the highest, is where everybody wants to be. Dave, I want to thank you again. I want to thank you for coming on, taking the time to explain. I hope we're gonna spread this out on all our social networks. We're gonna tag Soccer Quebec. It's a pleasure to do it with you. Especially in English, where I'm much more comfortable, as you saw from the C diploma, than I am in French. That's why they threw me in the aquarium. So. Dave, thank you again. And any parting shots, anything you want to get off your chest. I give you time to shine and
No,
put
no,
yourself
no.
out there.
I think a discussion on Milan Roma will have to wait for another time.
Yes, yes, because we're both
We'll have
not
to wait
in
for another.
in a position to talk right now. So
It's not a good year, but I
it's
really want
not.
to thank you for the invitation, and obviously for us, for me, it's a great opportunity to kind of to share what's being done. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Thank you, David, and please stay on, guys. For everybody else, thank you again. Thank you to Evangelista. Thank you to Presidente in the background, who's feeding me all these wonderful questions for David. I can't take all the credit, David. He's the mastermind behind this, guys. Thank you again. Thank you for tuning in to the local soccer show, guys. Check out Milan Weekly Podcast channel. If you subscribe, yes, you will get Milan stuff. But yes, you will also get the local soccer show notifications for you, and check them out. We have them nicely presented in a nice section where if you don't like Milan, it's great. Subscribe anyways, and come and check out the local soccer show. So thank you, David. Thank you to Soccer Quebec, guys. Let's go local grassroots soccer, the local soccer show. Ciao.
Appreciate it.